This is Joseph Drust, and welcome back to another episode of Ask ZBrush. So we had a question sent in asking, how can I export out multiple subtools to STL and maintain the scale? So to start off, I just have ZBrush loaded up, and I have a Cyberman helmet here loaded in. Now this helmet has been prepped for 3D printing, so it's broken out into multiple subtools, and all these subtools have been decimated. So now my file is ready to go, I just need to export this out. So to do this, I'm going to navigate up here to the Z plugin tab and just open this up. And then I'm going to click this little button here to dock it over to the side. And then I'm going to open up the 3D print exporter area. Now the 3D print exporter's default setting is going to look at your model, generate a bounding box around all the parts of your model, and then export it out at a specific size to one single STL file. So if I come over here and click Update Size Ratio to start this process, it's going to look at all the subtools the model contains, and it's going to create a bounding box around all of them. So after this is completed, you'll get a number over here that's been updated. So right now, 30 inches would be the vertical dimensions, and then we have 26 inches going this way and 24 inches going that way. So if I want to change this model to, say, be 5 inches from top to bottom, I can come over here, and in the Y, I can type in 5 and then hit Enter. And you'll notice that the other dimensions will change accordingly. And now I can come through and just click this STL button. This will now open up a little window. I can type in a new name for this file here and hit Enter, and it's going to go through and save out all these subtools as one single STL file. And in the Y dimension, it's going to be 5 inches. So now let's say I want to export out all the pieces of the model into separate subtools. So how can I go by setting up the 3D print exporter to do that? So if we come to the 3D exporter again, we can open up this advanced options area here. So I already have my size set, so it's 5 inches top to bottom. And underneath the advanced options, I want to go to the C export options area here. And here we have a button that's labeled Export in Separate Files. So if you toggle this on, it's going to now go through, and every single subtool on your model now is going to export out as a separate STL file. And it's going to maintain the size of each subtool in relation to the bounding box. So since this is 5 inches through here, if it exports out, say, this part here, it's going to be placing it in that 5-inch bounding box from this vertical distance. And it's going to export out so the scale of this piece respects the entire dimension. So just need to come over here and just turn this option on. You can also disable color and textures if you don't have them on your model. And after you have that done, just come over here and click that STL button again. So open up a new window, and I'm just going to come in and label this a prefix, just CM underscore, and then click Save. Now after you have this set to export in separate files, you're going to get this little window that's going to pop up. And here you have choices for how these files are going to be named. So I already have my subtools named correctly, so I'm going to use choice 2 here and just click that. And now it's going to go through and export out every single one of those subtools separately into their own STL file. So if I go to the folder now where I save those out, you can see I have separate STL files for all those different parts. So there are also some other options you can set in this advanced area. So right now, this setting up here for the size has been doing it for all the tools. So it's generating a bounding box across all the subtools. Well, let's say I have one subtool that I know the size of that subtool, and I want to use that to lock in the global scale and then export everything out in relation to that tool. So if I come over here and set this option to Set Selected Subtool Size right here. So it's going to set the dimension based on the subtool that I have selected. So I'm going to come back down here to my file, and in here I have a subtool that's labeled 1-inch cube. So I know that if I want to print out this helmet at the correct size so it's wearable, that this 1-inch cube has the correct size in relation to the entire helmet. So if I print everything out and respect this 1-inch cube size here, everything should come out correctly when I 3D print it, and it should be able to fit on my head. So I want to make sure I have that 1-inch cube subtool selected. Now I'm going to go back to this 3D print exporter up here, and I'm just going to do update size ratios again. So this is now going to give me an inch value here, and right now this is 25.4. So that's not quite 1 inch. So I can come over here and set this to 1 and hit enter. And now all these values should go close to 1. So now the size of this box here should be locked into that 1 inch. Now you also want to be careful when you're exporting out STL files, because STL files do not contain any scale or unit values. So if you export this out in inches and it's set to 111, when you export that out, if you load it into a program that has millimeters as its default values, it's going to see the STL file as 1 millimeter instead of 1 inch. So you just want to be careful that you have either millimeters or inches selected and you have the correct value in there based on what application you're going to, because the STL file does not contain any scale values or any unit values. So just remember that. So if you export this out at 1 and you load it into a program that is in millimeters, it's going to think that your file here is going to be 1 millimeter instead of 1 inch. So just be wary of that. So now that I have this cube locked into that 1 inch scale, if I now export this out again, I'm just going to make a new folder here and just label it 1 inch and just click save. Now I'm going to choose that subtool name again. So it's going to go through and it's going to lock in the scale from that one subtool and then scale everything else accordingly so that that one subtool that I had set to 1 inch is maintained. So after that's done, you can see I have all these subtools here. And these should all be scaled correctly based on that 1 inch cube that I set the size from. So that is what this set selected subtool size option over here does. You also have some other options. So right now we're exporting out all subtools. So even if the subtool was hidden in my list here, it's going to get exported out. So you may want to set this to visible over here. So that way you can hide different parts of your model and it's not going to use every subtool in your scene to export out as an STL. So once again, the process to export out multiple STLs, so taking every subtool and exporting it out into its own STL file, is to make sure under the advanced options here that you have export in separate files toggled on. And that's going to make sure that all those subtools get exported out as separate files instead of one single STL file. So if you have any other questions related to ZBrush pipelines or processes, please use the hashtag AskZBrush on Twitter. Happy ZBrushing.